The city was a frenzied whirlpool of activity, each individual absorbed in their own little world, rushing towards destinations unknown. Amid this chaos, I found myself navigating the crowded sidewalks with a sense of urgency, the ticking clock in my mind reminding me of my tardiness. Jessica, with her penchant for punctuality, would be waiting, and the thought of her sitting alone, checking her watch with growing irritation, quickened my pace. As I pushed through the doors of our agreed meeting spot, the quaint little bistro we often frequented for its secluded corners and quiet ambience, a wave of relief washed over me. The familiar, comforting aroma of brewed coffee and baked goods acted as a balm, momentarily easing the tension that had built up during my hurried walk. Scanning the room, my eyes settled on her, Claire, seated at our usual table by the window, her expression a mix of annoyance and amusement. "You're late," she stated, her voice carrying a playful undertone that belied her words. I know. I sighed, sliding into the seat opposite her. The traffic was a nightmare, and then I couldn't find my phone. It's been one of those mornings. Claire's features softened, her earlier irritation giving way to understanding. I figured as much. You're never late without good reason. She paused, her gaze shifting to the world outside the window before returning to me with a mischievous glint. But let's not waste any more time. I've been dying to tell you something. The waiter approached, his presence a welcome interruption, giving me a moment to collect my thoughts and brace myself for Claire's revelation. We placed our orders, and as he walked away, the anticipation in Claire's eyes was palpable. "So, what's this all about?" I asked, leaning in, my curiosity piqued. Claire took a deep breath, her expression serious. "I've been thinking about doing something daring. Something that might change everything." The gravity in her voice was unexpected, and I felt a knot form in my stomach. "Claire, what are you talking about?" She hesitated, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "I'm thinking of stepping out of my marriage, just for a night, with someone from work, and I need your help." The words hung between us, heavy and shocking. My mind raced to process what she had just confessed. "Claire, are you serious? Do you know what you're saying?" She nodded, a determined look crossing her face. "Yes, I've never been more serious in my life. But I need an alibi, and I can't do this without you." The request was a bombshell, leaving me grappling with a mixture of shock, disbelief, and a creeping sense of dread. This was not the Claire I thought I knew. This plan, this betrayal, it was a line we couldn't cross. "Claire, this is madness. You can't possibly think this will end well." But her mind was made up, her decision clear. As she outlined her plan, the reality of our conversation set in. This was not just a late arrival to a casual lunch. It was a late arrival to a pivotal moment that threatened to redefine our friendship and the lives entangled in Claire's dangerous game. The air between us was charged with an unspoken tension as we moved on to the main course, a delicate dance around the topic that had brought us here. Jessica's earlier reluctance weighed heavily on me, but the need to share my plan, to make her see reason, was overpowering. "Jess," I started, my voice steadier than I felt, "I know you're worried, and I understand why. But I've been feeling trapped, like I'm suffocating. Tom's been distant, and I just feel so alone." Jessica set down her fork, her expression softening. "Claire, I get that you're unhappy, but is this really the solution? Affairs are messy, and people get hurt." I sighed, frustration and desperation mingling in my voice. "I know it sounds crazy, but I've thought this through. It's not just a whim. I need to feel alive again, Jess. And I think I've found someone who can offer me that, even if it's just for a short while." Jessica leaned in, her concern evident. "And what happens after? What if you get caught? Have you thought about the fallout?" I nodded, having rehearsed this conversation in my mind 1,000 times. "That's where I need your help. I need an alibi, someone to vouch for me. If you could just say I was with you on the nights I meet him, no one would suspect a thing." Her eyes widened, the gravity of my request sinking in. You're asking me to lie for you, Claire. To cover up an affair. Do you realize how big of an ask that is? I reached across the table, my hand trembling as I touched hers. I do, Jess. And I wouldn't ask if I wasn't desperate. You're the only one I can trust with this, the only one who understands me. Jessica pulled her hand away, a mix of emotions playing across her face. Claire, I love you like a sister, but this is beyond me. I can't make this decision right now. I felt my heart sink, the rejection stinging more than I'd anticipated. Please, just think about it. I'm not asking you to support what I'm doing, just to help me not lose everything if it goes wrong. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of my request hanging heavily between us. Jessica finally spoke, her voice tinged with sadness. Claire, I'll think about it. But I'm not making any promises. This is a lot to process. I nodded, feeling a mixture of hope and despair. Thank you, Jess. That's all I'm asking for. As we finished our meal in silence, I couldn't help but wonder if I was making the biggest mistake of my life. Yet, the thought of backing out now, of returning to the monotony of my existence, was even more terrifying. I was at a crossroads, and whichever path I chose, I knew there would be consequences. I just hoped that with Jessica's help, I could navigate this treacherous journey without losing everything I held dear. The days following our lunch at Le Jardin were filled with an uneasy silence. Texts went unanswered, calls diverted to voicemail. Jessica's absence was a void, amplifying the gravity of the path I had chosen. Yet, despite the growing chasm between us, my resolve did not waver. The thrill of the forbidden, the allure of the unknown, it was intoxicating, pulling me further away from the life I had known. Then, one evening, as the city succumbed to the twilight, my phone finally buzzed to life with Jessica's name flashing on the screen. My heart leaped, a mix of excitement and apprehension coursing through me. Jess, I've been worried sick. Why have you been ignoring me? I blurted out before she could even speak. Claire, we need to talk. Jessica's voice was stern, devoid of the warmth I was accustomed to. Can you meet me at the Old Oak in an hour? The urgency in her tone left no room for argument. Yes, I'll be there. Jess, hi. But she had already hung up. The Old Oak was a quiet, dimly lit bar, a stark contrast to the bustling restaurant where we last met. I found Jessica at a secluded booth, a half-empty glass of wine in front of her. The sight of her, so distant and cold, sent a pang of regret through me. Jess, thank you for meeting me. I've missed you, I said, sliding into the booth opposite her. Claire, we're past pleasantries. I've been doing some thinking, and I've made my decision. She cut straight to the chase, her gaze unwavering. And the single word hung between us, heavy with anticipation. I'll help you, she said, her voice barely a whisper. But not because I agree with what you're doing, because I can't stand by and watch you destroy your life without at least trying to guide you through the fallout. I reached for her hand across the table, relief flooding through me. Jess, thank you. I promise, you won't regret this. Jessica pulled her hand away, her expression hardening. Save your gratitude, Claire. You might not like what I have to say next. I leaned back, the weight of her words grounding me. I'm listening. First, this ends the moment it threatens to come to light. I won't be dragged down by your choices. Second, you need to think long and hard about the consequences of your actions. Not just for Tom, but for you, for me, for everyone involved. Her words were a sobering reminder of the precarious edge I was teetering on. I understand, Jess. I do. Do you, Claire? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're about to jump off a cliff without considering how deep the water is below. Her metaphor struck a chord, the reality of my actions crystallizing before me. I know it seems reckless, but I feel trapped, Jess. This is my way of finding some semblance of freedom. Freedom at what cost, Claire? You're not just risking your marriage. You're risking our friendship, your integrity. I'm warning you, tread carefully. The path you're on, it's fraught with more danger than you realize. Her warnings echoed in my mind long after we parted ways that night. Jessica had agreed to help, but her words served as a stark reminder of the potential fallout. The excitement that once fueled my resolve now mingled with fear, a potent reminder of the fine line between seeking freedom and courting disaster. In the days that followed, the tension between Jessica and me grew, a thick fog that refused to lift. Our conversations, once filled with laughter and confidences, now treaded carefully around the elephant in the room. But life, with its perverse sense of timing, was about to throw a curveball that neither of us could have anticipated. It was a late Thursday evening when I found myself alone at a local bar, nursing a drink, lost in thoughts of my clandestine meetings and the web of lies I had begun to weave. That's when he approached me. A man no older than myself, with a weary look that seemed to mirror my own internal turmoil. He introduced himself as Mark. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, gesturing to the empty seat beside me. I hesitated, unsure. "I'm not really in the mood for company," I replied, hoping he'd take the hint. Mark smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "Neither am I, honestly. But sometimes it's the company of strangers that can offer the most comfort." Against my better judgment, I nodded, allowing him to sit. There was something about him, a sense of shared despair, that piqued my curiosity. We sat in silence for a while, sipping our drinks, each lost in our own thoughts. It was Mark who broke the silence. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders," he said, his voice gentle. I chuckled bitterly. "You could say that." He nodded, as if he understood all too well. "I've been there. Hell, I'm still there. It's why I'm here tonight, trying to drown out the memories." The conversation that followed was unexpected. Mark shared his story, a tale of love found and then lost, not to fate or circumstance, but to betrayal. His wife, the love of his life, had embarked on an affair, leaving him shattered and alone. "I trusted her with everything I had," Mark said, his voice barely above a whisper, "and she threw it all away for a fleeting moment of passion." His words struck a chord within me, a painful echo of the path I was walking down. "I'm sorry," I found myself saying. "I can't imagine going through that." Mark shook his head. "No, you can't, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. The pain, the betrayal, it changes you. Makes you question everything you thought you knew about love." There was a pause, a moment where the unspoken hung heavily between us. Then Mark looked me straight in the eyes, his gaze piercing. "Be careful with the choices you make," he warned. "Some things, once broken, can never be fully mended." His words felt like a cold splash of reality, a stark reminder of the consequences of my actions. "Thank you," I said, though I wasn't sure what I was thanking him for. For his story, for the warning, or simply for the reminder that my actions affected more than just myself. Mark nodded, stood up, and left, disappearing into the night as suddenly as he had appeared. I sat there for a long time afterward, contemplating his unsolicited tale, the warnings unheeded echoing in my mind. The encounter left me shaken, forcing me to confront the reality of my actions. Yet, despite the turmoil, the allure of the forbidden remained. Mark's tale was a warning, one that I should have heeded. But the heart, as they say, wants what it wants, and mine was a heart in rebellion, dancing dangerously close to the edge of destruction. The days following the night of revelation were a blur, a series of moments strung together by a profound sense of loss and betrayal. The house we had shared, once filled with laughter and love, now felt like a mausoleum, each room a testament to the memories we had created, now tainted by the truth of Linda's affair. I moved through those days like a ghost, my interactions with Linda strained and minimal. The air between us was thick with things left unsaid, a constant reminder of the chasm that had opened up in our lives. It was on a gray, overcast afternoon, the sky mirroring the turmoil inside me, that Linda approached me in the living room, where I had taken to spending most of my days, surrounded by the ghosts of our past. "James," she began hesitantly, "we need to decide what comes next." I looked up at her, the pain and fatigue etched deeply in my features. What is there to decide, Linda? You made your choice 6 months ago. She flinched at my words, the guilt in her eyes palpable. I know I hurt you, more than I can ever express. But we can't live like this in this limbo. We need to talk about separation, about moving forward. The word separation hung in the air between us, heavy and final. It was one thing to know it was coming, quite another to hear it spoken aloud. Is that what you want? I asked, my voice hollow. To end our marriage. Linda's eyes filled with tears, her voice breaking as she replied, It's not about what I want anymore, James. It's about what's best for both of us. We can't go back to how things were. Too much has changed. I nodded, the reality of the situation settling in. You're right. We can't go back. I never thought it would end like this. Neither did I, she whispered, the sorrow in her voice a mirror to my own. The conversation that followed was one of the hardest of my life. We spoke of practical matters, of who would stay in the house, how we would divide our belongings, the steps we needed to take to legally end our marriage. Each word, each decision, felt like a nail in the coffin of our relationship, a relationship I had believed would last a lifetime. As Linda and I worked through the details of our separation, the finality of it all began to sink in. The future I had envisioned, with her by my side, was gone, replaced by an uncertain path I would now have to walk alone. In the days that followed, we began the painful process of disentangling our lives, of packing up memories and saying silent goodbyes to the dreams we had shared. It was a time of profound sorrow, but also of reflection, as I began to come to terms with the end of our marriage. One evening, as I was packing up some books, Linda came to me, a small box in her hands. I found these, she said, her voice soft. Photos from our trips, from happier times. I thought you might want them. I took the box from her, my hands trembling as I lifted the lid. There, in a jumble of memories, were snapshots of our life together, moments of joy and love frozen in time. I looked up at Linda, my eyes filled with tears. Thank you, I managed to say, my voice choked with emotion. Linda nodded, her own tears spilling over. I'm so sorry, James. For everything. As she turned to leave, I called out to her, a question that had been burning in my heart since the night of revelation. Did you ever truly love me, Linda? She paused, then turned to face me, her eyes meeting mine with a sincerity that I had not seen in a long time. I did, James. I truly did. And in some ways, I always will. With those words, Linda walked away, leaving me with a box of memories and a heart full of sorrow. In the aftermath of our broken marriage, I knew the road to healing would be long and fraught with pain. But as I looked at the photos in my hands, I also knew that, in time, I would find my way again, that I would learn to live, and perhaps even love, once more. The decision to confront our issues head-on had been made, but the path to reconciliation was fraught with uncertainty. The morning's conversation with Tom had set the wheels in motion, yet the real work lay ahead. It was a journey we had to undertake, not just for the sake of our marriage, but for ourselves. Later that day, we found ourselves in the living room, a space that had witnessed better days, now a silent witness to our attempt at mending broken bonds. Tom broke the silence, his voice a mix of determination and vulnerability. Claire, I've been thinking about what you said this morning, about facing our problems together. I think we've been avoiding the real issues for too long, hiding behind excuses and half-truths. I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. You're right, Tom. We've both been guilty of that. It's easier to ignore the problems than to confront them. But I don't want to do that anymore. I want us to be honest with each other, even if it hurts. Tom took a deep breath, as if bracing himself for what was to come. Okay, then let's start now. Honesty, no holding back. I feel like we've lost our connection, Claire. Somewhere along the way, we stopped being partners and started being roommates. And it scares me because I don't know how to get back to where we were. His admission struck a chord, the truth in his words mirroring my own fears. I feel the same, Tom. I miss us, the way we used to be. I've been so focused on what's missing in our relationship that I've neglected what's still there. We've both changed, and maybe we need to learn how to fall in love with each other again, as we are now. Tom reached out, taking my hands in his, a gesture of unity. I like that idea, but it's going to take time, Claire. We can't expect everything to be fixed overnight. I know, and I'm not looking for quick fixes anymore. I'm ready to put in the work for as long as it takes. Because I believe in us, Tom. I believe we're worth fighting for. Tom smiled, a genuine smile that I hadn't seen in far too long. I believe that too. So, where do we start? We start by communicating, by sharing our thoughts and feelings without fear of judgment. We start by making time for each other, by rediscovering the joy in the small moments. And we start by being patient, with ourselves and with each other. Tom nodded, a look of unwavering resolve in his eyes. Then let's make a promise, right here, right now. To be honest, to be present, and to be patient. To rebuild our marriage, one day at a time. I promise, I said, feeling a surge of hope at our renewed commitment. And I promise too, Tom echoed, sealing our vow with a kiss that spoke of new beginnings and the promise of a future rebuilt on the foundation of love, understanding, and unwavering resolve. As we sat together, hand in hand, the challenges ahead seemed less daunting. With each other's support, we had taken the first step toward healing. The road to recovery would be long and, at times, difficult, but with our newfound resolve, we were ready to face whatever lay ahead together. In the wake of our renewed commitment, the world didn't pause. It tested us, throwing obstacles in our path that seemed insurmountable. Yet it was during these trials that our resolve was truly forged, not in the quiet moments of peace, but in the chaos of life's storms. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across our living room, Tom and I found ourselves in the midst of a heated argument. It was the first real test of our pact, a disagreement that stemmed from an innocent misunderstanding, but grew into something more, fueled by old wounds and insecurities. You just don't get it, do you? Tom's voice was laced with frustration, his hands clenched at his sides. It's not about the dinner or the meeting. It's about feeling like I come second to everything else in your life. I felt a flare of anger at his words, my own grievances rising to the surface. And you think I don't feel the same? You're always so wrapped up in your work, Tom. When's the last time you asked me about my day or how I'm feeling? We stood there, facing each other across an invisible line that had been drawn between us, a line that represented all the unspoken words and unresolved issues. It was a line we had promised to erase, but there it was, as tangible as the anger and hurt that filled the room. Tom took a deep breath, his expression softening as he took a step toward me, effectively bridging the gap between us. I'm sorry, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't mean to make you feel unimportant. You're everything to me, Claire. I guess I'm just scared of losing what we're trying to rebuild. I felt my own anger dissipate, replaced by a profound sadness for the pain we were both holding on to. I'm scared too, I admitted, taking a step closer. But we can't let that fear drive us apart. We promised to communicate, remember? Tom nodded, reaching out to take my hands in his. I remember. I guess this is us, communicating the hard stuff. It's not easy, but I'm willing to try if you are. I squeezed his hands, a smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. I'm willing. We might have drawn a line tonight, but together, we can erase it. And so, we talked. We talked about our fears, our insecurities, and the challenges we faced. We talked until the anger and hurt were replaced by understanding and empathy. It wasn't a magical solution. The issues didn't disappear overnight, but we had taken a crucial step toward healing. As we lay in bed that night, the darkness enveloping us like a comforting blanket, Tom whispered, I love you, Claire. More than anything. I love you too, I whispered back, my heart full. And no matter what lines we draw, we'll always find a way to cross them. Together. That night, a line had indeed been drawn, but it wasn't one of division. It was a line that marked the beginning of our journey toward true understanding and healing. A line that we would cross, hand in hand, no matter what challenges lay ahead.